The three students sat in their dormitory room as dawn broke over Vega Prime. They had been awake all night, reading through the complete Sol incident files. The truth about humanity's expulsion from galactic society lay spread across their screens in thousands of documents, video logs and personal testimonies. "We can't just pretend we don't know this," Ji-won said. Her crystal skin was dim with exhaustion and worry. "This changes everything." Minho floated near the window, his gills working slowly as he processed what they had learned. "Do we really understand what this means? If we're right about why humans were banned, then the entire galactic military structure is built on a lie," Hieri finished. Her mandibles clicked rapidly with anxiety. For 200 years, everyone has believed humans were too violent for civilized warfare. But they were actually too peaceful. The irony was devastating. Humanity had been quarantined not to protect the galaxy from human aggression, but to protect galactic institutions from human peacemaking abilities. Every species that encountered human diplomacy, human curiosity, and human empathy began questioning why conflicts needed to be resolved through violence at all. "Look at this data from the AI Yuna," Ji-won said, pointing to one of the files. After the Sol incident, 12 different species requested permission to study human conflict resolution methods. The Galactic Council denied every request. "And here," Minho added, "intelligence reports showing that systems near human space experienced a 60% decrease in armed conflicts during the 47 years humans participated in galactic society, because humans kept mediating disputes before they became wars," Hieri said. "They were solving problems that others thought could only be resolved through combat." A soft chime indicated someone was at their door. They looked at each other nervously. It was barely sunrise. Who would visit them so early? Ji-won opened the door to find Professor Do-yoon floating in the hallway. The old Nixari's energy form pulsed with what looked like resignation. "May I come in?" he asked quietly. They stepped aside to let him enter. Professor Do-yoon looked at their screens, taking in the scattered files and reports. His glow grew dimmer. "So you found it," he said. "The complete truth about the Sol incident." "Professor," Minho began, but Do-hyun held up a hand. "I've been monitoring your research since you first accessed the restricted archives. I knew this day would come eventually. Young minds always find a way to uncover hidden knowledge. You've been watching us?" Hieri asked. "Protecting you," Professor Do-hyun corrected. "Do you think you're the first students to become curious about humans? Over the past 2 centuries, dozens of researchers have started down this path. Most were quietly discouraged. A few were relocated to distant systems. None were allowed to complete their investigations." Ji-won felt a chill run through her crystal body. "What happened to them?" "Nothing harmful," Professor Do-yoon assured her. "But their research was classified, their findings sealed, and their careers redirected towards safer topics. The truth about humans is considered too dangerous for general knowledge." "Why?" Minho asked. "If humans were peaceful, why hide that?" Professor Do-yoon moved to the window and looked out at the academy. "Because peace is more disruptive than war, young scholar. War is predictable. We've had the same rules for 12,000 years. Everyone knows their role, their place, their purpose." He turned back to them. "But peace, true peace, that requires imagination, compromise, and the willingness to see your enemies as potential friends. Most species in the galaxy aren't ready for that kind of change." "Were you really there?" Ji-won asked. "During the human conflicts?" "I was part of the coalition fleet that occupied Earth," Professor Do-hyun said. His energy form flickered with old memories. "I was a junior officer then, eager for my first real military campaign. I expected to participate in glorious battle. What was it like?" "Terrifying," he said simply. "Not because humans were violent, but because they weren't. They treated us like honored guests. They shared their food, their art, their stories. Human children asked me about my homeworld and whether I missed my family." Professor Do-yoon's glow grew brighter. "Do you know what it's like to have a human child ask if you're lonely, being so far from home? To have them offer to draw you a picture to help you remember your family?" The 3 students were quiet, imagining the scene. "By the time we left Earth, half my unit wanted to stay. We had come to conquer and remain to learn. The humans had done something no military force in galactic history had ever accomplished. They had converted their enemies into friends without firing a single shot." "But why ban them?" Hieri asked. "If they could create peace, shouldn't everyone want that?" "Should they?" Professor Do-hyun asked. What happens to military academies if conflicts can be resolved through conversation? What happens to warrior cultures if fighting becomes unnecessary? What happens to the entire galactic power structure if any problem can be solved through human-style diplomacy? The implications were staggering. Ji-won realized that entire civilizations were built around concepts of honor through combat, glory through victory, and identity through conflict. If humans could make all of that obsolete, the galaxy wasn't ready for a species that had evolved beyond the need for war. Professor Do-hyun continued. So they were quarantined, hidden away where their ideas couldn't spread. That's not fair, Minho said. Fair. Professor Do-hyun's energy flickered with something like amusement. Young scholar, fairness is a human concept. Most galactic species base their decisions on tradition, honor, or power. Humans introduced ideas like fairness, justice, and equality. That's part of why they were so dangerous. Hiri clicked her mandibles thoughtfully. What do we do now? We can't just pretend we don't know this. You have several choices, Professor Do-hyun said. You can submit a sanitized version of your research that mentions humans only in historical context. You can change your thesis topic entirely, or, Ji-won prompted. Or you can do what humans would do. You can tell the truth and accept the consequences. The three friends looked at each other. They had started this project looking for an interesting historical topic to write about. Now they faced a decision that could change the entire galaxy. What would happen if we published our real findings? Minho asked. Chaos, Professor Do-hyun said bluntly. Military institutions across the galaxy would face questions they're not prepared to answer. Species would begin questioning why they solve disputes through combat instead of conversation. The entire basis of galactic civilization would be challenged. But maybe that's not a bad thing, Ji-won said quietly. Professor Do-hyun studied her carefully. You sound like a human, young scholar. They were always asking whether the way things are is the way things should be. Over the next several days, the three students struggled with their decision. They could take the safe path and write a conventional research paper, or they could risk everything to share what they had learned. The answer came when they received an unexpected message. It was from Seong-min, a being they had never heard of, claiming to be descended from the quarantined humans. I know what you've discovered, the message said, and I know you're trying to decide what to do with that knowledge. If you're brave enough to hear the rest of the story, meet me at the coordinates attached to this message. The coordinates led them to a small park outside the academy. There they found a being who looked almost like the other humanoid species they knew, but with subtle differences. Softer features, more expressive eyes, and something in his manner that seemed familiar after all their research. You're human, Yeri said in amazement. Part human, Seong-min corrected. My great-grandmother was one of the original refugees from Earth. She married a Proximan colonist and started a family in exile. Refugees? Minho asked. You didn't find everything in those archives, Seong-min said. After the Sol incident, some humans chose to leave Earth voluntarily. They scattered across the galaxy, hiding their heritage, living quietly among other species. Why are you telling us this? Ji-won asked. Seong-min smiled, and in that expression they saw something they had read about in the files, hope combined with determination. Because it's time for the truth to come out. The galaxy has spent 2 centuries avoiding the questions humans raised. Maybe it's time to start answering them. What questions? Hieri asked. Simple ones, Seong-min said. Why do intelligent species assume that conflicts can only be resolved through violence? Why is honor more important than peace? Why do we accept that some problems have no solutions? He looked at each of them in turn. Humans weren't banned because they were too violent or too peaceful. They were banned because they asked better questions, and the galaxy wasn't ready for better answers. As they walked back to the academy, the 3 students knew their decision was made. They would present their real findings to the Galaxy Council. They would ask the questions that had been forbidden for 2 centuries. They would risk everything to give the galaxy a chance to choose peace over tradition, understanding over honor, and hope over fear. Standing before the great hall where they would make their presentation, Ji-won, Minho, and Hieri took deep breaths. In their hands was research that could change everything. Ready? Ji-won asked. Ready, her friends replied. The underground market on Vega Prime existed in the spaces between official regulations. Ji-won, Minho, and Hieri had never imagined they would need to visit such a place. But the official archives had shown them only fragments, and they needed the complete truth about the Sol incident. Jiho was not what they expected from an information broker. The small rabbit-like Euvorian sat in a cramped booth surrounded by data storage devices from a dozen different species. His large ears twitched constantly, listening for security patrols. "Students looking for forbidden knowledge," Jiho said, his nose wrinkling. "This is dangerous business, young ones. Why do you need to know about humans?" "We're writing a research paper," Yeri said. Jiho laughed. "A research paper that requires black market archives? No, you're looking for something specific, something the council doesn't want you to find." Jiwon decided to be honest. "We want to know what really happened during the Sol incident. Why were humans banned from galactic warfare?" Jiho's ears went flat against his head. "The Sol incident. Now that's a name I haven't heard in years." He looked around nervously. "That information will cost you more than grades are worth." "We have to know," Minho said. "Please." The broker studied them for a long moment. Finally, he nodded. "I have the complete files. Unedited, unredacted. But once you see them, you can't unknow what you learn." "Are you sure?" All three students nodded. Jiho pulled out an ancient data crystal. "This contains everything. Video records, communication logs, personal testimonies, the whole story of humanity's last war." He paused. "And why it terrified the galaxy into banning them forever." They took the crystal back to a private study room in the academy. When they loaded it, they found themselves looking at files they had never seen before. Complete records of the final human conflict, known officially as the Sol Defense War. "Look at this," Minho said, pointing at the timeline. 12 species formed a coalition to attack the human home system. They brought the largest fleet in galactic history, over 3,000 ships, Yeri read, against just 200 human vessels. "The humans were completely outnumbered," Jiwon said. "They must have known they couldn't win." They began reading the battle reports. The coalition fleet had approached the Sol system expecting a standard siege. Humans would defend their homeworld with honor, fight bravely until they were defeated, then surrender with dignity. Instead, something impossible happened. "They surrendered immediately," Minho said, staring at the screen, "before the battle even started." "That doesn't make sense," Yeri said. "Humans never surrendered. All the previous reports said they fought to the death, but the records were clear. As soon as the coalition fleet entered the Sol system, they received a transmission from Earth. The human government offered complete and immediate surrender, with only one request. They asked the coalition fleet to come to Earth for surrender ceremonies," Jiwon read. "They wanted to show respect to their conquerors and learn about their cultures." "It's a trap," Yeri said immediately. "It has to be." But as they read further, they found no evidence of deception. The human fleet powered down their weapons. They opened their communication channels. They provided detailed information about their defenses and military capabilities. "They're giving away all their secrets," Minho said in disbelief. "Their ship designs, their tactical plans, even the locations of their hidden bases." The coalition commanders were as confused as the students. They had prepared for a massive battle, possibly lasting years. Instead, they found themselves invited to what humans called a cultural exchange. The real shock came when they reached the personal video logs from coalition officers who visited Earth. Admiral Corvin of the Thakari fleet was the first to record his experience. Day 1 of occupation. "Humans have provided us with detailed maps of their major cities and military installations. They've also sent guides, civilian humans who want to show us their art and music. I don't understand the purpose of this." Day 3. Attended what humans call a concert, musical performance by their young. "I'm not sure why they would show us their offspring during a military occupation. Curious species." Day 7. Human children approached our soldiers today. They weren't afraid. They asked questions about our homeworld, our culture, our families. Several of my officers seemed disturbed by this interaction. The logs continued for weeks. Each entry showed growing confusion among the coalition forces. Commander Zeleth of the Valorian contingent wrote, Day 12. Humans continue to treat us as honored guests rather than conquering enemies. They've prepared elaborate meals featuring food from our homeworlds. How did they know what we eat? When did they learn our dietary requirements? Day 18. Met with human leaders today. Expected formal surrender ceremony. Instead, they asked about our goals for the occupation. They wanted to help us achieve our objectives efficiently. They said they hoped we could all learn from each other. Day 25. Some of my junior officers have requested permission to study human philosophy and literature. This is highly irregular. We are occupiers, not students. But the most disturbing logs came from the AI that had accompanied the coalition fleet. The artificial intelligence called UNA had been designed to analyze enemy psychology and predict resistance patterns. UNA's analysis was unlike anything in military history. Human response patterns do not match any known resistance models, the AI reported. Subjects displayed genuine curiosity about occupying forces. No evidence of deception or hidden agendas detected. Day 31. Human children continue to interact with coalition personnel. Multiple officers report psychological discomfort when forced to classify these young beings as enemy civilians. Recommend immediate separation of military forces from human population centers. Day 47. Coalition personnel showing signs of what humans term moral conflict. Officers questioning the purpose of occupation when subjects appear to welcome their presence. Some personnel expressing desire to protect rather than subjugate human population. The turning point came when several coalition commanders discovered human facilities they hadn't expected to find. Day 52. Located human military research centers. Expected to find weapons development. Instead found medical research aimed at treating diseases affecting coalition species. Humans have been developing cures for Thakari bone decay and Valorian crystal rot. Why would they research treatments for their enemies' ailments? Day 60. Discovered human cultural archives containing detailed studies of every coalition species. Not military intelligence. Art, music, poetry, philosophy from our homeworlds. They've been studying us to understand us, not to fight us. The final entries were the most shocking. Admiral Corvin wrote, Day 78. 3 of my senior officers have requested permission to defect to human society. They no longer wish to participate in the occupation of what they call the most peaceful species we've ever encountered. Day 85. Received communication from Home Fleet. High Command orders immediate termination of occupation and withdrawal from Sol system. Reason given. Coalition forces being compromised by enemy psychological warfare. But the real revelation came in the final analysis from the AI UNA. Summary. Human surrender was not tactical deception. It was genuine attempt to end conflict through what they term radical hospitality. By treating invaders as honored guests and potential friends, humans successfully converted an invasion force into a cultural exchange mission. Warning. Human approach to conflict resolution poses existential threat to current galactic military structure. If human methods spread to other species, traditional warfare may become obsolete. Recommendation: immediate quarantine of human space and prohibition of all human participation in galactic conflicts. Not to protect galaxy from human aggression, but to protect galactic military institutions from human pacification techniques. The 3 students sat in stunned silence as they finished reading the files. They weren't banned for being too violent. Jiwon whispered. They were banned for being too kind, Minho added. No, Hiri said, understanding dawning in her compound eyes. They were banned because they found a way to win wars without fighting them. They had found the truth. Humans hadn't been expelled from galactic society for breaking the rules of warfare. They had been expelled for making warfare itself unnecessary. And now the 3 students faced the same choice that had confronted the coalition fleet over 2 centuries ago. What do you do when you discover that everything you believed about conflict and resolution might be wrong? The retirement home for old soldiers sat on a quiet hill overlooking the academy. Jiwon, Minho, and Hiri had never visited it before. Most students avoided the place. Old warriors made them uncomfortable with their stories of ancient battles and forgotten wars. But now the 3 friends needed to hear those stories. Are you sure about this? Minho asked as they walked up the winding path. Some of these veterans are thousands of years old. They might not want to talk to students. We have to try, Jiwon said. The simulations showed us what human tactics looked like, but we need to know what it felt like to fight against them. Hiri had used her cousin's connections to find 3 veterans who had actually fought in the human wars. It had taken days of searching through old records. Most beings who had faced humans in battle were either dead or had requested their service records be sealed. The first veteran they found was sitting alone in a crystal garden. Admiral Kyunghwa was old even by Valorian standards. Her crystalline body had grown dim with age, and cracks ran through her translucent skin like scars. Admiral, Jiwan said respectfully. We're students from the academy. We're researching the human conflicts for our project. Kyunghwa's faceted eyes turned toward them slowly. Humans, she repeated. Her voice sounded like wind through broken glass. I haven't spoken that word aloud in 200 years. You fought against them? Hyeri asked. Fought? Kyunghwa laughed, but there was no humor in it. Child, what we did could barely be called fighting. It was more like being caught in a storm. The old admiral's body began to glow slightly as she remembered. I was commanding the 3rd Valorian fleet when we encountered them for the first time. We had received reports of a new species joining the Keltor Alliance, but nobody took them seriously. They were young, primitive. Their ships were crude compared to ours. What happened? Minho asked. We approached their position in the Altair system. Standard protocol. We sent formal challenges, announced our intentions, requested their surrender. We followed every rule of honorable warfare. Kyunghwa's glow flickered. They didn't answer. For 3 hours we waited for their response. In civilized warfare, you always give your enemy time to prepare, time to organize their formations, time to say prayers to whatever gods they follow. And then? Then they appeared behind us. The 3 students looked confused. Behind you? We were watching their main fleet in front of us, Kyunghwa explained. But somehow they had moved half their ships around our position without us detecting them. They had been hiding behind our own supply vessels, using our formations against us. Jiwan felt her crystal skin growing cold. They hid among your own ships? Worse than that. When they started firing, they aimed for our command vessels first. Not our strongest warriors, not our most honored champions. They wanted to cut off our ability to coordinate, to think, to plan. Kyunghwa's body grew dimmer. In 12,000 years of Valorian military history, no enemy had ever targeted command ships first. It was considered dishonorable, cowardly, but humans didn't care about honor. She turned to look at them directly. Do you know what it's like to fight an enemy that doesn't follow any rules? That doesn't respect any traditions? That treats war like a job to be finished as quickly as possible? Minho's gills fluttered nervously. Terrifying? Beyond terrifying, Kyunghwa said. It was incomprehensible. My officers kept asking me what we should do when the enemy wouldn't accept our challenges. How do you fight someone who refuses to fight fairly? The second veteran was different. Bora had once been part of the Zenthari collective, a plant-based hive mind that shared thoughts across thousands of individuals. But now she sat alone, disconnected from her people. The collective cast me out, Bora explained when they found her in the memory gardens. Her bark-like skin was dry and cracked. After what happened with the human prisoners. What do you mean? Hyeri asked. Bora's leaves rustled sadly. We captured 12 human soldiers during the Battle of Vega Station. Standard protocol was to hold them until their fleet could arrange an honor exchange. Usually prisoners are grateful for the chance to avoid further combat. Her voice became strained. But these humans, they wouldn't stop fighting, even in captivity. Even when they had no weapons, even when they were clearly defeated, they kept trying to escape. Maybe they were confused? Jiwan suggested. No, Bora said firmly. We connected to their minds through the collective. We tried to show them that they were safe, that they would be treated with honor, that the war would end soon and they could go home. She paused, her leaves trembling. What we found in their minds, it broke 3 members of our collective permanently. The students waited for her to continue. Humans have a concept they call duty, Bora said. But it's not like galactic duty, which is about honor and respect. Human duty means you never stop fighting no matter what happens to you, even if you're going to die, even if dying serves no purpose. That doesn't make sense, Minho said. That's what we thought. But when we looked deeper into their minds, we found something else. They believed that their individual lives mattered less than something they called the mission or the cause or their people. Bora's voice grew very quiet. One of them, a young female, had images in her mind of small humans, children. She believed that if she didn't keep fighting, those children would be in danger. She was willing to die alone and far from home because she thought it would protect them. And that broke your collective? Hyeri asked. The concept of individual sacrifice for others was so alien to us that our hive mind couldn't process it. 3 of our number went insane, trying to understand how a being could choose death over survival. The 3rd veteran was the oldest being any of them had ever seen. Taehyun was a Nexari like Professor Dohyun, but his energy body was so ancient it barely held together. He floated in a special chamber designed to keep very old energy beings stable. I was there at the beginning, Taehyun said when they explained why they had come. His voice was like whispers of solar wind. When humans first arrived in galactic space, we thought they would be easy to integrate into our civilization. What made you think that? Jiwon asked. They were young, curious, eager to learn. They asked excellent questions about our laws, our traditions, our ways of resolving conflicts. We were pleased to have such attentive students. Taehyun's energy flickered sadly. We invited them to participate in the border disputes as mediators. Small conflicts between minor species. We thought their fresh perspective might help find peaceful solutions. What happened? They solved the conflicts, Taehyun said. All of them. In less than 6 months, they had negotiated peace treaties that had eluded our best diplomats for centuries. The students looked confused. That sounds good. It was good, Taehyun agreed. Too good. They had ideas we had never considered. Instead of formal duels to settle disputes, they suggested something called compromise, where both sides gave up something to get something else. Instead of victory and defeat, they created win-win solutions where everyone benefited. Then why were they banned? Taehyun was quiet for a long time. Because they didn't stop there. After they solved the border disputes, they started asking questions about larger conflicts. Why did civilized species need to fight wars at all? Why couldn't diplomacy work for every problem? His energy body grew brighter as he remembered. They introduced concepts that threatened everything. They called war a failure of imagination. They said that any problem that could be solved by violence could be solved better by thinking. And the other species didn't like that. The other species were terrified, Taehyun said. For 12,000 years, galactic civilization had been built on the principle that some conflicts could only be resolved through honorable combat. Humans challenged that basic assumption. As they walked back to the academy, the three friends felt overwhelmed by what they had learned. The veteran stories painted a picture of humans that was completely different from what they had expected. They weren't banned for being too violent, Minho said. They were banned for being too peaceful, Hyeri added. No, Jiwon said slowly. They were banned for being too good at ending violence. But they still didn't understand what had happened in the final conflict that led to humanity's expulsion from galactic society. The veterans had told them about human tactics and human thinking, but none of them had been present for the mysterious Sol incident that ended everything. For that, they would need to dig deeper into the forbidden archives, and they were beginning to realize that some secrets were hidden, not to protect the galaxy from humans, but to protect the galaxy from human ideas. The simulation chamber was the pride of the Galactic Military Academy. Jiwon, Minho, and Hyeri stood at its entrance, watching other students practice battle scenarios inside the massive dome. Holographic ships moved through space, firing at each other in careful, organized patterns. It looks like a dance, Jiwon said. Minho nodded. Very formal, very polite. They had been thinking about the human files for days. Professor Dohyun's warning only made them more curious. They needed to understand what made humans so different that they were banned from all galactic warfare. There's Sunwoo, Hyeri said, pointing to a tall reptilian figure near the control panels. He runs the simulation programs. Sunwoo was a Draknari with dark green scales and intelligent yellow eyes. He was known for creating the most realistic battle scenarios in the academy. Students came from across the galaxy to train in his simulations. Sunwoo, Jiwon called out as they approached. We need your help with something. The Draknari looked up from his work. Let me guess. You want extra time in the simulators for your final project? Not exactly, Minho said. We want to run some historical simulations. From before the current warfare protocols. Sunwoo's eyes narrowed. How far before? About 200 years, Hyeri said. We found some old battle records and want to see how they would work in practice. Sunwoo's forked tongue flicked out as he thought. Ancient battles can be interesting to study. Which conflicts? Jiwon took a deep breath. Wars involving humans. Sunwoo went very still. His scales darkened to almost black. Humans, where did you hear that name? The restricted archives, Hyeri admitted. We're trying to understand why they were banned from galactic warfare. Sunwoo looked around to make sure no one else was listening. You found actual human battle data? Some of it, Minho said. But most of the tactical information was blocked out. We thought maybe simulations could help us understand what really happened. The Draknari was quiet for a long time. Finally, he spoke. I've been running simulations for 30 years. I've recreated every major battle in galactic history, but I've never tried to simulate human tactics. Why not? Jiwan asked. Because, Sun Wu said slowly, human warfare doesn't follow the standard models. Their tactics are incompatible with normal simulation parameters. But the students could see he was interested. Sun Wu loved challenges, and this was clearly something he had thought about before. Show me what you found, he said. They went to a private simulation chamber. Sun Wu loaded the standard pre-human warfare model. The holographic display showed two fleets approaching each other in open space. This is how galactic warfare worked for thousands of years, Sun Wu explained. Two fleets meet in neutral space. They exchange formal challenges and state their objectives. Then they engage in organized combat with agreed-upon rules. The simulation played out exactly as he described. The two fleets moved in formation, fired their weapons in turns, and when one side took enough damage, they would signal surrender. The winning fleet would then escort the losers away with full honors. Very civilized, Minho commented. Now, Sun Wu said, let me try to input some of the human tactical data you found. He worked at the controls, entering information from the files they had copied. As soon as he activated the simulation, alarms started going off. Error, the computer announced. Tactical parameters outside acceptable ranges. What does that mean? Hyeri asked. Sun Wu frowned at his screen. The computer says the human tactics violate the basic rules of engagement. Let me try to override the safety protocols. He worked for several minutes, bypassing security measures. Finally, the simulation started again. This time it was completely different. The human fleet appeared without warning, emerging from behind asteroids and gas clouds. They didn't send any formal challenges or state their intentions. They simply began firing at the enemy fleet with devastating efficiency. They're not following formation, Jiwan gasped. They're attacking from multiple directions at once. And they're targeting the command ships first, Minho added. That's not how galactic warfare works. You're supposed to fight the strongest opponent last to show respect. But the most shocking thing was what happened when the enemy fleet tried to surrender. In normal galactic warfare, as soon as one side signaled defeat, the fighting would stop immediately. Honor demanded it. The human fleet kept firing. Error, the computer said again. Enemy surrender not recognized. Continuing combat operations. Sun Wu stared at the display. They're not accepting surrender. They're trying to destroy the entire enemy fleet. The simulation ended with the complete destruction of the non-human forces. The casualty rate was over 60%. In normal galactic warfare, casualty rates were usually less than 1%. This can't be right, Hyeri said. No species fights like this. But Sun Wu was already running another simulation using different human tactical data. The results were the same. Devastating, efficient, and completely outside the normal rules of galactic warfare. Look at this, he said, pointing to the tactical analysis. They're using something called psychological warfare. They're deliberately trying to frighten their enemies. Why would you want to frighten someone in battle? Minho asked. Fear makes people fight harder. Not according to human theory, Sun Wu said, reading from the data. They believed fear would make enemies make mistakes or give up without fighting. They ran simulation after simulation. Each one showed the same pattern. Human tactics were not just different from galactic warfare. They were the complete opposite. They don't have any honor codes, Jiwan realized. They treat war like a job to be done as quickly as possible. Here's something called total war, Sun Wu said, loading another file. They would attack not just military targets, but also supply lines, communication networks, even civilian infrastructure. Civilians? Hyeri's mandibles clicked rapidly. But civilians don't fight in wars. Why would you attack them? According to this, Sun Wu said, humans believed that disrupting an enemy's entire society would end wars faster. They were so absorbed in the simulations that they didn't notice someone else had entered the chamber. What are you doing? They turned to see Nari, a senior student from the bird-like Thylorian species. She was the Academy's champion in combat simulations, winning every competition for 3 years running historical simulations, Minho said. Nari's feathers ruffled with interest. Can I try? I love testing myself against new scenarios. Before anyone could stop her, she had taken control of one of the simulation pods. Set me up against whatever you were just running. Sunwoo looked uncertain. Nari, these simulations are unusual. I can handle it, she said confidently. I've beaten every simulation this academy has. Sunwoo reluctantly loaded one of the human tactical scenarios. Nari's pod connected to the system, and she found herself commanding a fleet against human forces. The battle lasted less than 10 minutes. Nari's fleet was completely destroyed. She hadn't even managed to damage a single human ship. When she came out of the pod, her feathers were pale and trembling. That's impossible, she whispered. They didn't follow any rules. They attacked without warning. They wouldn't accept my surrender signals. They kept firing even when I was clearly beaten. Try again, Jiwon suggested, now that you know what to expect. Nari ran the simulation 5 more times. Each time she was defeated more quickly than before. By the end, she was shaking so badly she could barely stand. This isn't warfare, she said, her voice high and frightened. This is madness. How can anyone fight like this? How can anyone think like this? For the first time in academy history, a student had suffered what humans called combat stress from a simulation. Nari had to be taken to the medical center, muttering about enemies who fought without honor and wars without rules. Sunwoo stared at his screens. No wonder they were banned, he said quietly. They didn't just change how wars were fought. They broke warfare itself. The 3 friends looked at each other. They were beginning to understand that they had uncovered something far more dangerous than they had imagined. The humans hadn't been banned for being bad at war. They had been banned for being too good at it. The rain fell hard on the crystal windows of the Galactic Military Academy. Jiwon pressed her face against the cold glass and watched the drops roll down. Her crystal skin glowed softly in the dim light of the library. She was supposed to be working on her final project, but the words on her screen seemed boring. This is useless, she said to her friend Minho, who sat across from her. His blue skin looked darker in the library's shadows. Writing about old battle plans from 1,000 years ago? Who cares? Minho's gills fluttered as he breathed. Professor Dohyun said we need to pick something that changed how wars are fought. Maybe we should look at the Keltor Wars. Everyone writes about the Keltor Wars, Jiwon complained. She pushed her chair back and stood up. I want to find something different. Something nobody talks about. Their friend Yeri clicked her mandibles together. It was how her insect-like people showed they were thinking. What about the restricted files? I heard there are old records that students can't normally see. Jiwon's eyes brightened. Can we get into those? My cousin works in the deep archives, Yeri said. Her compound eyes looked around to make sure nobody was listening. She told me there are whole sections that are locked away. Things from before the current war rules. Minho frowned. If they're locked away, there's probably a good reason. But Jiwon was already excited. She loved puzzles and secrets. Think about it. What if we found something really old? Something that would make our project special? The 3 friends had been study partners for 2 years. They came from different worlds but shared the same curiosity about military history. Jiwon's people, the Zelthari, were natural historians. Minho's aquatic race excelled at understanding complex battle plans. Yeri's insectoid species were experts with weapons and technology. The next day, Yeri led them through corridors they had never seen before. The academy was huge, built into a mountain on Vega Prime. Most students only saw the upper levels with classrooms and living spaces. But there were many floors below, full of old records and forgotten files. This way, Yeri whispered. Her forearms moved gracefully as she opened doors with special codes her cousin had given her. The restricted archives are on level 15. They took an old elevator that creaked and groaned. The deeper they went, the colder it became. When the doors opened, they saw rows and rows of data storage units stretching into darkness. Wow, Minho breathed. How much information is down here? Records from 12,000 years of galactic warfare, Yeri said. But most of it is just boring reports about supply lines and troop movements. They walked between the tall storage units. Each one was labeled with dates and war names. Jiwon ran her fingers along the labels, looking for something interesting. Here, she said, stopping at one unit. This section is different. Look at these dates. Minho swam closer through the thin atmosphere the academy maintained for aquatic species. Those dates are only 200 years ago. That's recent compared to everything else here. And look at this label, Yeri added, pointing with one of her clawed hands. It says Species Restriction Files, Access Level Maximum. Jiwon's skin pulsed with excitement. Let's see what's inside. Hieri used her cousin's access codes. The storage unit hummed and opened with a soft hiss. Inside were thousands of files, but many of them were heavily marked with restriction warnings. Most of these are blacked out, Minho said, looking at the first file they opened. Look, almost every other word is missing. But Jiwan had found something interesting. This one mentions a species I've never heard of. It says, humans. Humans? Hieri repeated. I don't know that name. They gathered around Jiwan's screen. The file was mostly blocked out, but they could read some parts. The species known as humans engaged in galactic warfare for a period of restricted years. During this time, they introduced restricted new tactical approaches that fundamentally altered restricted. Following the incident at restricted, the Galactic Council voted unanimously to restricted all human participation in future conflicts. This is strange, Minho said. Why would an entire species be banned from warfare? Maybe they were really bad at it? Hieri suggested, but Jiwan was reading more files. No, look at this. It says they won most of their battles. But there are warnings everywhere. Extreme violation of combat protocols. Unacceptable casualty rates. Psychological damage to opposing forces. They spent hours going through the files. The more they read, the more confused they became. Humans had fought in galactic wars for less than 50 years, but there were more files about them than species that had fought for thousands of years. This doesn't make sense, Minho said. They were only involved for a short time, but look at all these changes that happened because of them. Jiwan pointed to another file. It says here that something called the Geneva Conventions became the basis for all current warfare laws. That's a human document. But if they were banned, Hieri asked, why are we still using their rules? The friends looked at each other. They had stumbled onto something much bigger than they expected. A sound echoed through the archives. Footsteps. Someone's coming, Hieri whispered. We need to go. They quickly copied what files they could and closed the storage unit. As they hurried toward the elevator, they heard a voice behind them. Students shouldn't be in this section. They turned to see Professor Do-hyun floating toward them. The old Nixari's energy body glowed dimly in the archive's shadows. His ancient face looked sad but not angry. Professor? Jiwan started to explain, but he held up a hand. I know why you're here, he said quietly. Curiosity is not a crime, but some knowledge comes with a price. We were just doing research for our project, Minho said. Professor Do-hyun's energy form flickered. And what did you find? Information about humans, Hieri said. But most of it was blocked out. The professor was quiet for a long moment. Humans, he repeated slowly. I haven't heard that name spoken aloud in many years. Did you know them? Jiwan asked. I was there, Professor Do-hyun said, during the last human conflict. I saw what they did to galactic warfare. He paused, and I saw why they had to be stopped. The three students exchanged glances. Their professor had been alive during the human wars? Professor, Jiwan said carefully, what really happened to the humans? Professor Do-hyun looked at them for a long time. Finally he spoke. That, young scholars, is a question that has haunted the galaxy for 2 centuries. If you truly wish to know the answer, you must be prepared for the consequences of that knowledge. As they rode the elevator back to the upper levels, the three friends knew their simple research project had become something much more dangerous. They had found the beginning of a mystery that would change everything they thought they knew about war, peace, and the galaxy itself.